Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Astro-Weather Check for Monday's Aquarius Full Moon. I have a lot to cover today. The energy of this week, building into the energy of the full moon, has been extremely intense and intensifying, and will continue into next week, culminating with the full moon on Monday, and then it'll start to subside. So they're just like the second Capricorn full moon astro weather check that I did. I have a list of aspects that I want to cover. There is a lot going into this energy that I want to make sure that I touch on, that kind of pulls in like more broad range overall cycles that are also in play with this energy. So I'll break it down as best that I can. If you are listening to the audio version of this, remember the video version is available on Spotify as well as our Sea Goddess YouTube. So I want to make sure that I cover all of this. We're going to take kind of what I usually do with the energies that are very complex, is we'll revisit the multidisciplinary approach today, and we'll pull in some of the symbols. I'll pull a card at the end from my Sacred Rebels deck, and we'll just dive into all of it. There's a lot going on. I'm sure that you're feeling it. If you're following the astrology of this, I'm sure that it's feeling complicated and complex, especially even if you're like a beginner or just getting into all of this. But overall, in general, I'm sure that you're feeling it regardless of any of the information that's been being put out there. So we'll start with a couple of announcements, and then we'll just get right into all of this. I want to make sure I cover everything, and there's a lot to cover, like I said. So I hit record at 9:45 a.m. here in Atlantic City, New Jersey. It is Friday, August 16th. The full moon is not till Monday, but I wanted to kind of get this in ahead of it, just to cover all the energies that have been influencing us this week, and then going into and leading up to the full moon, because like I said, they'll be intensifying and adding more layers of it all, culminating with the full moon. So just a couple of announcements. I have the last Astro Weather Check that I did. It was also a podcast episode. It was kind of a hybrid. I did that a couple of weeks ago for the Leo new moon. And that was the episode where I shared some very vulnerable and important information on the crossroads that I see myself approaching with my work and income, and challenges that I'm having there as far as entrepreneurship and all of that. So I put out what I called the episode Leo New Moon Call for Creativity Support. And I started a crowdfunding campaign asking for contributions to help me build a little bit of my nest egg back to keep going with this path. So I will include a link to that in the episode description. It's been almost 2 weeks, and so far I've received one contribution and a whole bunch of people reaching out, just sending me messages on all the different platforms, just with messages of encouragement and support and just sweet, sweet love that I've just been receiving from everybody. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everybody who's already reached out or contributed something or reciprocated something in any way. I got some bookings, which I loved. I got to work with somebody that I haven't worked with in a while. So that is still active. That will be active until my 44th birthday on October 6th. This week, I just had the 3-year anniversary of my Great Resignation, and I shared that story in that episode as well. So it's on. Like this is like this, all this energy that I'm going to be getting into today with the Astro Weather Check. Like I am living and breathing this in a big way. And the way that the creative solution that I've come up with is calling on my community. So if you listen to these Astro Weather Checks, if they're helpful to you, if you enjoy them, if they're having an impact on your own life as far as working through the astrology, I put these out twice a month for the new moon and the full moon. And I also have the other creative project that I tied into that crowdfunding campaign was my Cosmic Connection weekly horoscopes that I've been writing for Shore Local News Magazine. If you're enjoying those, that's another newer creative project that I've added on that I also put out for free. The Astro-Weather Checks are put out for free. And so is my podcast, Becoming Chiron, the key to unlocking healing and personal alchemy, as well as the writing that I do and blog posts and monthly newsletters and things that I curate as well as contribute to for Sea Goddess. So there's a lot that I do, but there's a lot that I put out there into the world from my own heart, my own service work for free for everybody. But at this point, I just need a little bit of assistance financially with all of that to continue. So that's where I'm at. And I just wanted to remind everybody listening to this that that was active as of Sunday the 4th, I believe it was, with the Leo new moon, and will be up and available for contributions until my birthday, October 6th. So a reminder there on all of that, and that will be the only link that I'll include as far as the episode descriptions, which will be to the campaign platform that I picked is called Fundly. I chose that rather than Kickstarter because Kickstarter is all or nothing. But I actually just saw a couple of people's work and colleagues that I respect in the field have very successful Kickstarter campaigns for the same exact thing, calling for financial support for all the freely available creative offerings that they put out. So I'm very hopeful that mine will be supported for me as well. And that link is going to be there. And that will bring you to the campaign page, which has a written version of everything that I spoke in the last podcast episode, as well as like at the bottom, there's a menu of all of my offerings. And I actually just updated my page, my web page, to have a better outlay of everything that I offer, like categorized. So that's seagoddesshealingarts.com/Ursa Alchemy is where you can find all of my services, my offerings, creative projects, all of that. So I did make some tweaks to my own presentation of what I offer based on putting together the crowdfunding campaign, which was a good thing for me that really came out of it as well. So that link will be there, like I said, in the episode description. The only other announcement that I have today that will be before the next Astro-Weather Check is we had a hurricane remnants come through, and we had an event scheduled for August 6th, I think it was, or August 9th, Friday, August 9th, at a vineyard, DiMatteo Vineyard in Hamilton. It was called it's called a Sip and Shop, Smoke and Grub, because it's a vineyard and they make wine there, and they have all kinds of really delicious flavors, including blueberry, which is seasonal. Hamilton's the blueberry capital of the world, if anyone didn't know that. So we have a food truck joining us, the Smoke and Grub food truck. So it's Sip and Shop, Smoke and Grub with Sea Goddess. And we'll be there. We rescheduled it and postponed it because of the weather to August 30th. So Friday, August 30th, we will be there now rather than the originally scheduled date when the Hurricane Debbie came through and wreaked havoc on the Northeast and the South. Like the whole eastern part of the country had some impact from that. So we rescheduled due to that. It was really windy here that day. I'm so glad that we did because it was not a nice day at all. We'll be inside though. So if it does rain next time, hopefully it won't be another hurricane, and we'll have the event. So August 30th, Friday from 4 to 8 in Hamilton at DiMatteo Vineyards. And Mandy will be there doing $20 readings, and I'll be there, and I believe Sue will be there as well. Mandy's mom, Sue, who makes all of our jewelry. And we'll be there with all of our Sea Goddess goodies, all of our the aromatherapy products that I make, all of Sue's crystal jewelry, Jessie May's orgone energy pieces, and we'll have some sage and crystals and t-shirts and that kind of stuff available as well. So come out and support us in Hamilton on Friday the 30th. We'd love to see you there. And I think that is the only other announcement that I have for today. So let's get into our Astro-Weather Check. We have a Aquarius full moon incoming on Monday, the 19th at 2:25 p.m. here in Atlantic City on the East Coast, Eastern time. And we are back on track now with our lunar cycles. We have been as of the second Capricorn full moon. So we had our Leo new moon a couple weeks ago. I believe it was on the 4th. And now we'll have a full moon in the opposite sign of Aquarius, which is the way that the lunar cycles normally work, on Monday. And just a reminder, the Aquarian energy with the Leo Aquarius axis. I covered a lot more about Leo last Astro-Weather Check in the new moon episode, but that is our inner child. It is the only sign ruled by the sun, so it relates very much to our consciousness, to our creativity, coming from the heart, just being bold and having joy and pleasure and just doing things that light us up. And then on the other side, we have Aquarius. So Leo is our personal contribution. And then on the other side, Aquarius is how that contribution impacts the whole. So it's the individual versus the collective, essentially. Aquarius is the rebel. I love Aquarian energy. It's one of my favorites. So I always get excited with this full moon every year. So the rebel, the innovator, the humanitarian, the scientist, everything that is different about us, our individuality, I think is one of the big themes that's coming up with this full moon in particular. So I chose my Sacred Rebels deck for our card for today, because I feel like showing up in our authenticity and being who we are and offering up our own creative force to the collective, unhinged, and not requiring validation from anybody else but ourselves, is the energy that we're in with Leo and Aquarius. And the Sacred Rebels deck I always use, if you've been with me for a while, with Aquarian energy, with Uranian energy, and we have both of those influencing this full moon. Uranus is the modern ruler of the sign of Aquarius. Saturn is the traditional ruler. And all the planets are at play again with this. Like I gave the analogy last time with the last full moon in Capricorn, the second one, that all the planets are at a big table and they're trying to figure something out. With that last one, it was a very different vibe. This time, all the planets are back in the boardroom again. They all are at the table, with the exception of Pluto. Pluto had a big influence last time. Pluto's kind of sitting in the back corner this time, observing and taking notes. There is still a little bit of an influence here, but we have all the planets at the table again. They're all talking to each other, trying to figure things out, but this time the energy is more problem-solving, action-oriented, and a little bit more challenging this time around because of all the layers of influence. So just kind of, I wanted to give that overall analogy, I guess, and summary of the energy and just the reminder on Aquarius in general. And let's look at the chart and I will break this down. So here we go. All right, so this is the chart for when the full moon is exact. Like I said, Monday, August 19th, 2:25 p.m. here in Atlantic City on Eastern Time of New Jersey, East Coast of the United States. And I think that one of the first things that I saw when I looked at this, even though I knew it was there energetically, was all the red. So yes, there's a lot of red in the software that I use. Red is the color that's used for energies that are challenging. And we have two big, what's called T-squares. I'll outline them here. So you can see the one is here. And then this other one that has multiple lines is here. So we have two overlapping T-squares. One that's already kind of been building this week, and one that will culminate with the full moon. So what does that mean? I always say that squares are opportunities to take action. They are a call to action, essentially, whether you have them natally or we're dealing with them collectively like we are right now. You know the energy if you know your chart. If you don't know your chart, it shows up as just something that's always there that there's like a balancing act that always needs to happen. There's also something that it kind of comes to a head at some point, and it requires you to do something. It's like the shit or get off the pot feeling. And once you do the thing, it usually also involves confronting a little bit of fear, a little discomfort, maybe getting out of your comfort zone. Once you're on the other side of it, there's usually a great reward, whether that's energetically, you just feel really good about what you've done, or there's some kind of something that manifests in your life that comes out of it. There's always something on the other side that is positive. I see it as, because I was forced to act, I did the thing, I'm on the other side of it, and I grew in some way. I learned something, I achieved something. And that's the energy that we're in. There are multiple planetary players, heavy hitters at work in this energy. So I want to start there. And like I said in the beginning, it ties in some bigger cycles that we were already kind of in that started relatively recently. And the first one that I want to make sure I touch on is the interplay between Jupiter and Saturn. So back in 2020, on the December solstice, we had Jupiter and Saturn come together at 0 degrees of Aquarius. This was a big deal. So planets, just like the sun and the moon, have their own cycles with each other. And when two planets come together and start a new cycle, it's kind of like a new moon energy. So Jupiter and Saturn, it's roughly a 20-year cycle. When they come together, it's a big deal because it's usually illustrating some kind of collective thing, like a new beginning on the collective. And then the planet, they move on. So how this happens with every planet as well, with each other, kind of like the lunar cycle, like the sun and the moon come together once a month. And then the moon squares the sun, then we have the full moon when it's opposite, and then we have the last quarter square, and then they come together again. That's the easiest one to relate this to, because that's the one that we're always dealing with on a monthly basis. So with the outer planets, with Jupiter, Saturn, and beyond, they all have cycles with each other. So do the inner planets, kind of like the lunar cycle. So they come together, it's like a new moon, a new beginning, and then they square each other, they oppose each other, they square each other again, and they come back together. So on December 21st of 2020, Jupiter and Saturn came together. And this was a really big deal because for the next 200 years, every time these two come together, it will be in air signs. So this whole, what got set off, the new beginning that started back then, a few years ago almost, or actually 4 years almost. It involves our intellect. It involves the way that we communicate, problem solving, all the things that go into the element of air, using our voices, all forms of communication, but mostly verbal, written, that kind of thing. And just our mental acuity. And it was in Aquarius. So I've already covered that energy. So now here we are this week, a couple of days ago, I believe it was. Let's see. This has been building all week, but yeah. So the first quarter square essentially happened this week between Jupiter and Saturn. And you can see that here in the chart. And I'll just describe it as best I can for anybody listening to the audio. We have Jupiter in Gemini, and we have Saturn in Pisces. So those signs square each other. Squares are 90-degree angles. So you can see that's this red line right here. So Saturn moved into Pisces in March of last year, and will be there into next year, and then it'll move on. Saturn spends roughly 2.5 years in every sign. And Jupiter moved into Gemini back in May, the end of May. And I think that it might be helpful to revisit that episode that I did. It would have been the Astro-Weather Check for the Sagittarius full moon back in the end of May, because I touched on the energy of Jupiter and Gemini. So now we're at this space where the two are challenging each other. When they're together, the energies get infused. Jupiter and Saturn are very different energies. They're almost like paradoxical to an extent. Jupiter wants to expand and connect and grow and is more optimistic to an extent. But Jupiter works in funny ways. Like you have to be willing to co-create with Jupiter. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. It's magnetic. It draws everything to itself. Saturn is pretty much the exact opposite. Saturn brings a dose of reality to things. Saturn contracts and restricts. Saturn makes us take responsibility for things and not kind of be in our little happy bubble. But Saturn's energy is also necessary. They're both necessary. And now they're challenging each other. So think back to 2020, the end of 2020. We all know what was going on the global stage back in 2020. I don't need to go into that at all. We were all there. And think about now. So how have these two planets, as they've moved on now into this configuration, when it relates to the lunar cycle, is known as what's called a crisis of manifestation. So that energy also applies here. Where are you seeing a challenge to what started back then? How are you being called to act in a different way now? And how has that kind of manifested or shown up in your life all week, essentially? Because this has been building pretty much all month and it culminated this week. Like they're still exact right now at the time of the full moon, 17 to 17. And Pisces and Gemini, I just want to mention also, we have, these are the mutable signs. So mutability is adaptation. It's coming up with creative ways and solutions to change and doing things in a new way. So Saturn being in Pisces has been kind of dealing with grief to an extent, especially if you're super connected to everything happening globally and collectively, but also putting form to our dreams and our visions and being real about our spirituality. That's kind of the vibe that we've been going through with Saturn since it moved into Pisces. Jupiter and Gemini I touched on, but just to kind of give a brief overview of the energy as I see it. Gemini is information. Gemini is the media, the internet, verbal information between ourselves as well. And I just feel like right now, if you turn on the TV to any like national regular channel like NBC, ABC, whatever media outlet, whatever, it is overwhelming. Especially, and I know this similar things are happening around the world, but especially right here, right now. Debates, information, so the way that I described this in that episode when I did the full moon episode was it's a really good time to hone in and fine-tune discernment and your sense of discernment and your intuition and how information feels in your body. Because information that is coming from a truthful source vibrates very differently from something that's been manipulated in some way or has an alternative agenda, like propaganda. So we're being faced with these two together now, the challenges between the two things that I just described. So for me, personally, the way that I've been working with this is detaching a little bit more frequently from the box on the wall and focusing on my lived experience. I've actually been getting a lot more back into like print news and our local news, like writing for Sure Local. I always enjoyed Sure Local, but it's really like the only newspaper that we have around here that's legit and consistent anymore, and it's free. So I've just really been enjoying getting back into print news and local news and what's going on in my own sphere. And what can I do? What can I contribute besides the cosmic connection horoscope guidance that I've been contributing for people to help them navigate, but also just kind of realize like what this is all very personal, yet also very collective thing, because we have our own natal charts, but then we're also subject to as everything moves through the sky as well, and how it influences our own chart, but also our day to day. So this square is really important to one of the big undercurrents of energy that's in the full moon, what we've been in this week. Remember, we're also in Mercury retrograde still. That started right around the new moon and will continue until the 28th of this month. It started in Virgo and now it's back in Leo and will stay in Leo until the end of the retrograde. So we had a different element flavor to this retrograde that's been happening. They've been shifting from earth to fire. The shift started last year. I touched on that and all the other Astro-Weather checks that I did during all the Mercury retrogrades. But the day before we have our new moon, or I'm sorry, the day before we have our full moon on Monday, we'll have the beginning of a new Mercury cycle in the sign of Leo. So creative solutions, creative thinking, that's coming more from our hearts, working through all of this energy and through everything that we're going to be facing through the rest of this year, is the energy that we'll be in. Mercury cycles are roughly 3 months. So this kind of starting right before the full moon, I think is really important, just because it's a new way of thinking about things. Like I said, that's that Aquarian way anyway. I'll touch on the other squares with the full moon, but Mercury is heavily involved in this full moon in a challenging way. But it also rules the sign of Gemini. So an internal process is kind of going on within ourselves, within the collective, of new ways of thinking about all of this. Creating new, one of the great things I thought that came out of everything from 2020 was a variety of platforms. Free speech comes into mind to this as well. That's a very speech, and are very Gemini things, also very mercurial things. So there are new ways to connect. Censorship is also something that's been heavily prevalent in all of this since 2020, especially. So there's a lot on the collective that's being kind of pulled into this energy. And then we have the opportunity to find our own way in all of this, find our own creative path, find our own personal contribution to the collective. So the other thing that came together this week as well was Mars and Jupiter in Gemini. That has passed. I believe that was exact on the 14th. So Mars just adds fuel to the fire. So I feel like this week has been especially intense in everything I just described. And that's what Mars does. So Mars came together with Jupiter. So they had their own kind of new moon this week, but also simultaneously squaring Saturn. And Saturn and Mars isn't exactly the prettiest energy. It brings up, the more aggressive side of things. It brings up the more macabre aspects of things. So we had that energy influencing everything this week as well. So that's one part of one T-square, pretty much. And then on the other side of it, so the completion of the first T-square is Venus. So we had Venus all week moving through the sign of Gemini, coming closer and closer to completing this T-square. So T-squares, two planets on opposite sides, and then another one at the 90-degree angle to both of them. So that's this big red triangle, number one, that you're seeing here. Venus is our connection to everything we love and value. Venus has just reemerged in the evening sky. So there's a maturation in the energy now in this connection. Venus squaring Jupiter, Venus squaring Mars, Venus opposing Saturn. And that always brings our relationships into play. That always brings up patterns in our relationships into play. So not only do we have everything I already described with Saturn and Jupiter and Mars, but we have Venus on the other side also at the table, trying to have her voice heard as well, but bringing more practicality energy to this. This is also mutable. Virgo is also a mutable sign. It's Earth. So I feel like Venus in this is more of a sense of reason. Venus in Virgo is very, very fine-tuned to the details of things. There's a perfectionistic like idealistic view on relationships to an extent with Venus and Virgo. So just be aware of that and just kind of wanting things to be right, but we have all this other mess to clean up in the situation. So remember the practicality and the groundedness and the energy and the voice of reason part of it. So that's Venus's contribution to this. And then if you're just seeing this kind of play into your own personal relationships, having the reality of something come to light, or valuing yourself where you're giving too much of yourself away, that comes into play with Venus and Saturn energy, but also Venus and Mars are the great lovers of the zodiac, and they're kind of, heated and arguing at the table right now too. Last time I described it as they're kicking each other under the table, or they're having a productive conversation. There's a lot of kicking under the table going on right now. So that energy translates to our own personal lives as well. So that is the one of the big T-squares that's been culminating throughout this entire week. It's been building, and some of it is pretty exact at the time. Actually, most of it is pretty exact at the time of the full moon. When we're talking about exactness of things, like we see everything here within like 1 or 2 degrees of each other. So that's as exact as it gets. Think of it as like being on a roller coaster. We've been you're getting pulled up to the crescent, and then we get to the top, and then we get to enjoy the ride down. That's the integration phase. Right now we're like, okay, everything's kind of showing up, showing itself, and then we get to the peak, which is coming, and then we're on the downswing, and we get to kind of see how we acted, review how we acted, and integrate whatever has come up. So that's just one thing going into this energy. Just a reminder, I always cover this when we're talking about T-squares. There's always a pressure release valve, because there's something on the other side. There's something that's not on the other side. That's why it's T-square. Otherwise, it would be a full square. The other side of this, the sign that's not involved, there's nothing here right now that I am pulling into this. No planets, no primary planets, is Sagittarius. So this is where we get to be optimistic in our goals, where we get to aim high and really see from the higher perspective of things. This is where we get to think about new information and new ideas and take that newness, put it into action, and then let it grow into knowledge and wisdom and philosophy. This is where we get to see how we're students, and then we can become teachers. So if all that energy that I just described is feeling a little bit too much, we get to kind of rise above a little bit. That's the blow off point. That's the pressure release valve. So like for me, I said, I'm distancing myself a bit from all of that in the box on the wall right now, and kind of dropping more into my own spiritual practices. That's kind of how I am working through all of this. Like I'm meditating more. I picked up a book of fiction yesterday, which I don't usually read, which I absolutely loved. So just like putting something else in my awareness that is going to teach me something probably about how to navigate everything else that's over here. So just know there is a pressure release valve. It is Sagittarius. If you know where all of this is happening in your own chart, then you know where your Sagittarius space is, and all of the other, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo. So whatever themes of that space in your chart apply, that can be a clue as to drop into something else that can help with everything that we're going to be feeling over the next week. Okay, T-square 1 covered. T-square 2 will be at the full moon. So this one will be more brief, as it's just a few days, not, a month or a week build up. So the full moon will be at 27 degrees of Aquarius, opposite the sun at 27 degrees of Leo. Like I said, Mercury's right there, right next to the sun. We'll have come together with the sun the day before. So at the time of the full moon, we are in the very beginning stages of the new Mercury cycle. So just pay attention to any new ideas coming into your awareness. Think about, it's a good time to reflect on the last Mercury cycle that started during the last Mercury retrograde went in Aries. And I covered that during that Astro-Weather Check around the eclipse, the big total solar eclipse that we had back in April. So just think about kind of how what came into your awareness or started then is falling away a little bit, and this new energy in the Leo space that's now coming in. And then we have, this only happens twice a year, Sun square Uranus in 27 degrees of Taurus. This is pretty exact at the time of the full moon. Uranus is at 27 degrees, 11 arc minutes of Taurus. Uranus has been in Taurus since May of 2018. This is the farthest it's gotten into Taurus since that time. And I'll touch a little bit more on that. And then the full moon will be at 27 degrees and 15 arc minutes. So that's pretty tight, like almost exact to the arc minute. Sun squares Uranus twice a year. Moon squares Uranus twice a month. So that's more familiar. Whenever we have the square between the sun and Uranus, so the last time would have been in Aquarius season back in the winter, it's a challenge to our consciousness. The sun is our consciousness. It's our light. In Leo, I already covered all of that. So the expression of that, the creative expression of that coming from the heart. And Uranus forces us to an extent when we have these squares, like I said, it's a challenge, it's a call to action. How can we drop more into that individual aspect of the energy? Uranus relates very much to our individuation journey in this lifetime. Uranus relates very much to the energy, kind of like the kundalini in our body, in our spine. It, like I said, relates to rebellion, showing up as your most authentic self. That's very much tied into the Leo energy as well. In Taurus, Uranus has kind of been shaking up the foundation for all of us on our feelings of safety and security, our values, our resources. That's Taurus. But there's also the other side of it, which is the sensory experience. So there's a lot going into this because it's happening at the same time as the full moon. So on the other side of it, with the moon, it's our emotional state with all of this. How do we feel about showing up as our most authentic selves? How do we feel about breaking free from our comfort zones and maybe inherited patterns of behavior on an emotional level that kind of keep us playing it small or keep us from shining our light for the sake of others who might not truly accept us? So there's a lot going in with the full moon on that inner world level to the energy. So we're all being challenged in some way with that at the time of the full moon as well. So that's the other T-square. We also have the second of 3 Mercury square Uranus. So with this retrograde, Mercury squared Uranus one time when it was going quote unquote direct. Now it's retrograde and it will go direct again. So we're in the middle, we're in the second chapter of this story as well. But now it's an internalized process. We're kind of steeping in what's been coming up for us as far as our mental state, our voice, friends, all of that stuff, finances that relate to Mercury, travel, like what's been happening during the retrograde for you. How can you change your mind about some things that might expand your consciousness with all of this too? So that's another layer involved in this T-square that's happening at the full moon with Uranus involved. The other blow-off point on the other side of this, so we have the fixed signs now: Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio. There's nothing going on in Scorpio, at least not that I'm pulling into this. So that's another pressure release valve, an opportunity that we have to just sort of take a deep breath with all of this energy. Scorpio is the transmutation of the emotional parts. So you can dive into either the Sagittarius energy, which is there, or the Scorpio energy, which is there as the cool off, the pressure release. How do you feel? Essentially, how can you transform yourself, your emotional state, and all of this? What's your call to action on a deep, intense emotional level that will help you purify, shed old skins, all the scorpionic, the plutonic process, all the things that I've covered so far in season 4 of Becoming Chiron? How can that help you grow through all of this? There's another piece of this that comes into play. If you know your Scorpio house, if you know where this is happening in your chart, gives you clues. Where's your Scorpio energy? What themes are involved there? Anyone right now who's 42, 43 years old, you are in the thick of your Uranus opposition. If you have Uranus in the late degrees of Scorpio, or now even in the early degrees of Sagittarius, that's kind of coming online. So this is a really big activating full moon for you in particular. So just pay attention personally to all of that as well. And how has your life been revolutionized since May of 2018, since Uranus has been in Taurus? I've shared that. I mean, that was the first story I shared pretty much from the start of the podcast. So you all know what's been happening for me, and you all know where I'm at. So it's a journey, but I love the energy of Uranus. I love the energy of Aquarius. I'm probably a little bit biased, like I said. My South Node is in Aquarius, so I've got that just in me, in my energetic makeup. But just know, 42, 43-year-olds, like, this is a very activating full moon for you and a very activating time. Uranus is about to go retrograde, so I'm not sure if it's going to get to 28 degrees just yet, but it's been dancing in these end degrees of Taurus. I believe Uranus will also shift next year, so we have a lot of big shifts coming for the outer planets next year. So just know, like, I'm speaking to you directly right now. Like, this is a really big deal for you, with just at the moment of the full moon, but also like over the last several months, like this Uranus opposition has come exact for the first time, myself included. So big deal for all of us too. All you 1980, 81, 82 babies, for sure. So there's that part. So those are the squares. There is some support though. As you can see, if you're looking at the chart with me, there's some blue. We got some blue going on here. Blue is the harmonious flow of energy. One part of that is Chiron and the Sun and Mercury. So Chiron is right now retrograde at 23 degrees of Aries. And there's a trine, harmonious flow, to Mercury retrograde at 26 degrees of Leo and the Sun at 27 degrees of Leo at the time of the full moon. So that is a helpful aspect in all of this that adds another layer of energy to the whole thing, the healing journey, the mastery, all the things that you all know. I talk about Chiron. The podcast is called Becoming Chiron, the Key to Unlocking Healing and Personal Alchemy. So that fuel is there in this energy for everybody to take advantage of. Where's your Aries space? Where's your Leo space? How are those two connected? How can you call on Chiron to help you in your creativity, your voice, your consciousness, like all of this? I pray to Chiron all the time, like I would just an angel or a guide. That energy is available to us always. So you could even pull that into how you're feeling through all the energy. Chiron is very available right now and willing to help. Use Chiron to your advantage. It will help you in your healing journey tremendously with whatever is coming up and challenging. What's the call to action? Chiron can help. Chiron's there. Fire to fire, that's action. So we have that. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, which is kind of rare right now, we have a Yod also, Y-O-D. It pretty much translates to the finger of God. It's like a destiny energy. I've also covered this in the podcast and previous Astro-Weather Checks when it's shown up. We have a Yod available right now at the time of the full moon. Between, like I said, so most of the planets are sitting at the table in the boardroom. Pluto's in the back taking notes and observing. Neptune kind of is too. So Pluto, our capacity for transformation in all of this. Neptune, our connection to source in all of this. They're in a very peaceful dialogue, I guess you could say. They're in the back taking notes at whatever is transpiring here. They're the record keepers. They are taking the minutes, and then they can help with whatever resolution comes out of all of this. So we have influence from the outers here, supporting the sun. So that's why I'm saying that the expansion of the consciousness, the expansion of ourselves, dropping more into our authenticity, that is the destiny point in the energy of this full moon. Where's your Leo space? Are you a Leo? There's support in a big way in this moment and for the last couple days of Leo season from Neptune and Pluto. They're in a sextile. They're in a sextile in everybody's birth chart. So that's everyone that's born right now. Like they've been in a sextile. This will get more exact as Pluto drops back into Capricorn next month. 29 degrees of Pisces to 29 degrees of Capricorn. Pluto's right now sitting at 0 degrees of Aquarius, so that's close enough. With yods, it's usually like exact to a degree, and that pretty much is there as another supportive underlying energy, but very important, like mic drop moment to this Astro-Weather Check. The yod to the sun. The finger of God is pointing to the sun. We just released our soul broadcast for August, another one of the creative project free offerings that I mentioned, and it's titled Sunburst. And I wrote all about how to infuse more solar energy into your daily life, whether we're in Leo season, which is, you know, the peak of it here in the Northern Hemisphere when the sun is strongest. Sun is domicile, so Leo's the only sign that the sun rules. And we can still call that energy into our daily lives through working with things that relate to the sun. So like the metal gold, the colors yellow, orange, and red, crystals like sunstone. So I give a guide and talk about all of that in my contribution to this month, which I'll also put in the episode description. So you can read all about that. Those are public for the second half of every month. So that could be also a resource that you can kind of pull into all of this energy as well to just connect more with the solar energy. I titled my part Solar Infusion. So because the finger of God is pointing to the sun in this moment at the full moon, but also the last couple of days of Leo season, the sun will shift into Virgo next week. That's also something that can be like a pressure release valve, but there's definitely like a yod's your destiny to an extent. So there's that element in play here as well right now at this time of the year. Okay. All right, I covered everything from my list for that, for the full moon. So like I said, I wanted to kind of call in to play here a multidisciplinary approach. So I'm going to feel it out. As you know, I always give the new moons and full moons taglines. We're going to look at the symbol sets for the moon, the sun, and Uranus. And I'm going to go more deeply into the ones for the moon, just because this is a full moon Astro-Weather Check. But I want to touch on the two. So I'm going to read the Sabian symbols, which are really brief, and one of the symbol sets. So what I'm talking about here, if you haven't been with me before, is there are symbol sets, they're channeled imagery for every degree of the zodiac. So I have these big, you know, like doorstop books called the Circular Temple, which has almost all of the sets except for the Sabian symbols, which I have in a separate document. So I'm going to read all of the symbol sets and the descriptions for the Aquarius part of this, because that's the full moon. But I also want to touch on the Sabian. I'll just touch on the Sabian symbols for all three. So we're going to kind of pull this into this too to give it more of a vibe. And I'm thinking that the title, the tagline for the full moon will be one of these. I'm not sure which one just yet, but you'll know once it's released. So like I said, sun 27 degrees of Leo, moon 27 degrees of Aquarius, Uranus 27 degrees of Taurus. So with these symbol sets, you always round up to the nearest degree. So these will be for 28 degrees of Leo, Aquarius, and Taurus. So I'll leave the chart up while we're reading these. So I'm going to do the Sabian symbols first. So the Sabian symbol, and I'm sharing my screen here so you can see them. It'll probably be a little hard to read, but so the Sabian symbol for the moon, the full moon, so 28 degrees of Aquarius, a tree felled and sawed. The Sabian symbol for 28 degrees of Leo, many little birds on the limb of a large tree. And the Sabian symbol for 28 degrees of Taurus, a woman pursued by mature romance. So let those sink in. So we have the little birds. They know they're contributing something to the collective. They are shining their light and being themselves on the, this little space of a large tree, but they're still singing, they're still creating. On the other side, a tree gets felled. So I'm going to read that this will come kind of more into play, but it's pretty cool because if, say, for example, the tree that the birds were singing on is the one that got felled, then they just find a creative solution and fly to another tree. But remember, they contributed something to the energy of that tree by singing and being themselves, and there's a vibration that ripples regardless. And then that tree is felled and sawed, so that means it's getting used as a resource for something. So the positive vibration the birds put into it gets carried forward into whatever that tree is becoming. So that is the energy in a different way. Pretty cool. And then we'll get into these, which is also cool. And then just kind of an overall reminder, when we're getting into the later degrees of every sign, there's a maturity in the energy. So the mature woman part of it, what was it for Taurus? So the one for Uranus, a woman pursued by mature romance. Very interesting. Remember, I said the Venus part of this is the voice of reason. So there is a maturity level to this, to the shakeup that's happening. Are you at a space in your life where that is what you desire, mature romance, rather than playing games and the lower vibration of love and desire? So that energy is at play as well with Uranus, but I think also Venus squaring Mars, like I think that really connects well to the overall energy of the subsets of all the energies going in as well. So I'm going to stop my share and we'll read the rest of the symbols for 28 degrees of Aquarius. Then we'll pull our card and we'll wrap it up for today. So Aquarius 28 from the Circular Temple by, I always butcher his name, John Sandbach. Sorry. This is a 2-volume book. Heavy, big, but it's very inclusive of all the symbols. So, all right. 28 Aquarius. The degree angel, Yeazel. And the meaning of that is speaking the right words, divine consolation and comfort, transforming/receptive. The title for this degree, tunneling under obstructions to find alternative ways of progressing. The Omega symbol, the entrance to a vast complex of caves beneath a mountain range. And then, so more elaboration on that one. You're intent on exploring the inner workings of life, to learn what is underneath things. You question the purpose and validity of goals and realize that beneath all striving and desire are other deeper motives, which the person being influenced by them may not even be aware of. You seek out the least obvious aspects of experience for the purpose of reaching a holistic picture by searching for the missing or abandoned pieces. The Pleiadian symbol, a botanist reading the rings in a cross section of an extremely old tree. There's that tree again. You have insights into the nature of growth and progress and the cycles through which it occurs. And these insights can be used by you and others to understand where we are and where we're going. You're aware of how development happens, and along with this, are highly sensitive to the subtleties of the past and how all is formed from the forces that were at work throughout it and which still continue. The Chandra symbol, a tapestry loom. On it is a half-finished tapestry. You're aware of how everything is open and subject to change. Even those things which we think are done may be modified or completely transformed. You're highly imaginative and are at your most powerful when allowed to continually envision alternate ways of doing anything rather than being pinned down and limited to one way. You realize how stifling the following of methods and systems can be, and are always able and willing to share insights that open up everything to new possibilities. You realize that no agendas are necessarily the right ones or set in stone. Some wish to scale the mountain's heights. Some wish to delve deeply. Some wish to delve deeply under them. Interesting. The Azoth symbol, which is the last one. Wanderers find a place they decide to make their home. You're on a quest to find the environment that will serve the best purposes of all, and are able to seek out and discover the atmosphere that will foster growth. You're good at finding the proper settings for things, the place where a particular thing needs to happen, the right moment in time to fulfill a particular destiny. All right. So those have a lot to offer to the energy. Remember what I said, creative ways, creative thinking, path forward being something different, being a little revolutionary, breaking free from the norm, breaking free from the pattern, getting innovative, finding innovative solutions. Aquarius is air, changing our mind, Mercury's influence. Think about all of that. There's a lot of typos in that book, and I apologize. Sometimes I don't catch them before I read them. So if you have that book or thinking about getting it, just be aware that there's a lot of typos. Or maybe it was channeled that way. I have no idea, but with all my Virgo energy, I've got issues with typos. All right. So we're pulling our Sacred Rebels card to kind of sum up the Astro-Weather Check for today. We went about an hour today. It's a little bit of a longer one, but like I said, I had a lot to cover. And we're okay, here we go. Release the dark wound, let love live. Card number 25. On it, it's a imagery of two hands releasing a fish into the water. And as the fish is being released into the water, there are ripples going out. So there is a release of some sort happening here. There's always a release with a full moon. Chiron is here to help us to put medicine on the dark wound. And remember that there's only two emotions based on what we've learned in the Course of Miracles, love and fear. So which vibration are you going to choose? And this message is let love live. Remember, Venus is the voice of reason. And Leo is all about our heart. So let me read a little bit from this and then we'll close out for today. I'll read the healing process for everybody. So each of these cards has a description of the meaning of the card in the Oracle deck, and each one has its own healing process. So the healing process for this card: say the declaration below out loud 3 times. Be in your heart and really feel what you are expressing. So if you are in a place to do so with me now, let's do this together. If not, re-listen to this part and actually do this healing process. I think it'll be helpful. So we'll say it 3 times. It's not that long. I now choose of my own free will to release all cellular memories and belief systems based in the dark wound of criticism, judgment, shaming, and fear, so that my creative, loving energy may thrive in a nourishing environment conducive to growth. Through all time and space, through all dimensions of my being, through unconditional love, so be it. I now choose of my own free will to release all cellular memories and belief systems based in the dark wound of criticism, judgment, shaming, and fear, so that my creative, loving energy may thrive in a nourishing environment conducive to growth. Through all time and space, through all dimensions of my being, through unconditional love, so be it. I now choose of my own free will to release all cellular memories and belief systems based in the dark wound of criticism, judgment, shaming, and fear, so that my creative, loving energy may thrive in a nourishing environment conducive to growth. Through all time and space, through all dimensions of my being, through unconditional love, so be it. So perfect. So as I was reading that, 2 things came to mind that might be helpful to you to add into that healing process. One is the practice of Ho'oponopono, which you can send to past versions of yourself, to whatever. And then also, if you are Reiki attuned, the distance healing symbol and the verbalization of that can be really powerful to add into that healing process if you want. I was doing it as I was saying it, so both of them. Okay, we went on for an hour today. That is our Aquarius Full Moon Astro-Weather Check. A very, 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 probably maybe the second most potent full moon of this year. I definitely still think the second Capricorn one was the most, with the Plutonic influence there. But I plan on, for myself, just to share a little bit, I saw this coming, and that's why I created the crowdfunding campaign and put it out there when I did, because of what's happened for me in my life since the December solstice of 2020 and where I'm at now with the challenge and the call to action personally in my own life. It directly relates to my future, my community, my tribe, the people, all of you who listen to this, and my personal finances. That's where my T-square is between Jupiter and Saturn. As well as on Monday, I'm feeling like clearing of energy. So where I also moved right before that conjunction. I moved December 1st of 2020. And since I've been in my new space, one of the practices that I have not been keeping up with, that I used to religiously, is cleansing of my stones and cleansing of my space with every full moon. where I used to live, there was outdoor space. We had 2 decks, and I was able to actually put my stones outside under the energy of the full moon. I don't have that here, but during this time of the year, during the summer months, the moon is really low in the sky. I live very close to the ocean now. So it actually does, the moonlight comes through the front windows where I live. So I can actually put them on a table in that space of the apartment. So I am going to take every stone that I have, which I used to do, every piece of jewelry that I wear almost every day that has some kind of crystal on it, and I'm going to cleanse all of them. And I'm sure that they will be very appreciative, as I'm looking at a bunch of them now that pretty much haven't even moved since I moved in here and set up the space. Cleanse them all. I'm going to sage the whole space, probably use different sage, Palo Santo, and just bells, and just really give this space a good, I feel like that's needed. And the full moon's happening on the moon's day on Monday, so I feel like that's just a really good time to do it. And that'll be the way that I release. That'll be my pressure release valve in my Sagittarius and Scorpio spaces for contents under pressure. So that's what I'm gonna do. It's time. It's needed. I've slacked big time with everything that's been happening in my life since 2020. So yeah, I encourage you to do the same if you feel called, or whatever you're feeling called to do in that energy leading up to Monday. On Monday, remember the full moon here on the East Coast is 2:25 p.m. So I'll probably be working on that most of the morning. And then yeah, it's just looking at it, you know. I just love looking at the moon, and it's been beautiful as it's waxing right now too. So that visual connection, if you can see it, is always there as well and available to all of us. So remember my own personal call for creativity support. If you found this Astro-Weather Check helpful, I greatly appreciate your support. Tune into the one link and episode that I did where I shared that story. And like I said, that crowdfunding campaign will be active until my 44th birthday on October 6th. So that's coming. That's coming soon. So I appreciate your support. And as always, remember to be a maverick. Bye.